Before we dive into the story, I want to ask, where are you watching from today? Are you tuning in from New York, Chicago, or maybe somewhere down in Florida? While you think about that, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and give this video a like so you don't miss any of our stories. Trust me, you'll want to stay until the end of this one. You know how some days just feel like ordinary, quiet days? That morning, I had no idea it would turn into something unforgettable. I was in the storage room at work, crouched down among dusty boxes and old office supplies, trying to make sense of the chaos that had built up over months. The air smelled faintly of cardboard and cleaning solution, a mixture that somehow always made me feel both productive and a little nostalgic. My hair was tied back, sleeves rolled up, and I was humming softly to myself to keep the monotony from dragging me down. I had just pulled a stack of old files off the top shelf when I heard the click of the door opening. At first, I thought it was one of the interns, but no, it was him, Mr. Lawson, my boss. He rarely came back here. In fact, most people didn't even know he'd walk into the storage area unless there was a serious reason. My heart gave an unexpected leap, half embarrassment, and half something I couldn't quite place. "Morning, Carol," he said, his voice unusually soft. He didn't come in with the usual brisk efficiency, the kind that usually made me straighten up and feel immediately on edge. No, he lingered just at the doorway, almost hesitant, like he was stepping into a different world altogether. "Good morning, Mr. Lawson," I replied, trying to sound composed even though my fingers were still tugging at a particularly stubborn box of ledgers. He came closer, carefully avoiding knocking into the stacks of paperwork around us, and that's when I noticed the subtle changes in his expression, something gentler, more open than I'd ever seen in the office meetings or quick hallway exchanges. "I didn't mean to startle you," he said, stopping just a few feet away. I wanted to see how you were doing here." There was a pause, a quiet that felt unusually intimate in the cramped, dimly lit room. I swallowed hard, trying to maintain a professional tone even though the air between us felt charged with something I hadn't anticipated. "I'm doing fine, just trying to get this mess sorted out." He nodded, and for a moment we just stood there, surrounded by old boxes and forgotten office memories. Then, very gently, he said something that made me stop completely. "I've always admired the way you handle things, Carol. You make this place feel cared for." It wasn't flattery in the usual corporate sense. There was warmth, genuine respect in his words, a recognition that hit me deeper than I expected. I felt a rush of something, gratitude, surprise, and a curiosity I couldn't quite name. For a long minute, we just looked at each other, and I realized this wasn't the usual office interaction. Something about the quiet of the storage room, the faint dust motes floating in the sunlight through the small window, made it feel like we were the only two people in the world. And in that moment, I understood that today was going to be different. That maybe, just maybe, an ordinary day could lead to something unforgettable. After that moment in the storage room, I went back to sorting the boxes, but it was impossible to focus completely. Every now and then, I caught him glancing at me, not in a way that made me uncomfortable, but in a way that made my chest tighten and my thoughts swirl. There was a calmness in his presence, like being near a quiet fire on a cold evening, steady, warm, and reassuring. I noticed little things I hadn't before. The way he tucked his hands behind his back when he was thinking, the subtle smile that touched his eyes even when he wasn't speaking, the way his voice seemed softer, almost thoughtful, when he asked about how long it might take to get the storage room organized. I realized I'd always respected him professionally, but today I was seeing him in a completely different light. "I didn't realize it was such a mess back here," he said, bending slightly to pick up a stray folder. His fingers brushed against mine as he handed it over, and for a second, the world seemed to shrink to that tiny connection. "You'd be surprised what people just toss in here," I said with a small laugh, trying to mask the flutter of nerves in my stomach. He chuckled quietly, a low, comfortable sound that made me smile more freely than I had in weeks. I guess I should come down here more often, he said. There was a pause, and then he added, not just to see the mess, but to see you. The words hit me differently than I expected. There was no implication beyond the moment itself, no rush or demand, just honesty. I realized I was drawn to that honesty, to the fact that someone I'd known professionally for years could suddenly feel so personal, so immediate. I went to reach for another box, and he stepped closer, not crowding me, just close enough that I felt his presence fully. The sunlight filtering through the small window caught the strands of gray in his hair, the subtle lines on his face that told stories of experience and care. For the first time, I really looked at him, not my boss, not the man who assigned me tasks, but as a person, fully, with all the layers I had never considered before. Carol, he said softly, almost as if he were speaking to himself, do you ever feel like there's more to all this? More to the day-to-day than just work? I paused, looking at the shelves, at the boxes, at him. I do, I admitted. Sometimes I feel like we're all just moving things around without really noticing what's important. He nodded slowly. Exactly. And I think maybe we forget to acknowledge the things and people that really matter until they're right in front of us. We stood in silence for a few moments, surrounded by dusty boxes and the faint scent of old paper. I felt an unexpected calm settle over me, mixed with a nervous excitement. There was an unspoken agreement in that quiet, a mutual recognition that something rare and fragile was happening between us. When he finally moved to leave the storage room, he paused at the doorway. I don't usually say things like this at work, he said, his eyes locking with mine. But I'm glad I came down here today. Me too, I whispered, and the words felt heavier, more significant than either of us probably realized. As the door closed behind him, I sank back against a stack of boxes, my heart still racing. I knew something had shifted, a subtle but undeniable change in the rhythm of my day, my life even. For the first time in a long time, I felt that anticipation that life could surprise you in the most ordinary of places, and that maybe, just maybe, it could be something beautiful. The next few days felt different, though nothing had visibly changed. Work went on as usual, papers were filed, emails answered, meetings attended, but I noticed myself thinking about that moment in the storage room more often than I cared to admit. Every time I saw Mr. Lawson in the hallway or passing by my desk, my pulse quickened, and I caught myself searching for some small sign that he, too, was still feeling the same quiet connection. Then one afternoon, everything changed again. I was organizing the back corner of the storage room, this time dealing with boxes of old office decorations, when I heard the soft click of the door. I froze for a second, a strange mix of anticipation and nervousness washing over me. And there he was, standing there with a folder in his hand, looking almost hesitant, like he wasn't sure if he should step inside. "Hi, Carol," he said softly. The tone was different this time, warmer, more intimate, like he was letting me in on something private. "Hi," I replied, trying to steady my voice. "Back again?" He smiled faintly, stepping closer. "I wanted to check on something, and maybe talk." He glanced at the shelves around us, the boxes stacked unevenly, the sunlight spilling through the window, and then back at me. "Do you have a minute?" I nodded, and suddenly the room felt smaller, cozier, as though the walls themselves had folded in to make space for just the two of us. He handed me the folder and lingered for a moment, his fingers brushing mine as I took it. That small touch sent a thrill through me I couldn't explain. We started talking, not about work, not about deadlines or tasks, but about life, about experiences, about things we'd never shared before. He spoke about his childhood, the challenges he faced, the quiet regrets and small triumphs. I found myself opening up, too, revealing pieces of myself I usually kept tucked away behind polite smiles and professional composure. There was laughter, of course, gentle and genuine, and there were moments of silence, comfortable and reassuring. For a while, it felt like the rest of the world had faded away, leaving only the two of us in that dim, dusty storage room. And in that space, I felt something unexpected: trust. Trust that we could be real with each other without judgment. Trust that our connection wasn't just fleeting curiosity, but something deeper, something human. At one point, he leaned back against a shelf, looking at me in a way that made my stomach tighten. "Carol," he said softly, "I know this might seem sudden or unusual, but I feel like I've known you in some way for a long time, even if we've never really talked like this." I swallowed hard, trying to put my emotions into words. "I feel the same," I admitted. "It's unexpected, but it feels right." He nodded, a quiet understanding passing between us. There was no rush, no pressure, just a gentle recognition of a connection that neither of us had anticipated, but both of us were willing to explore. When he finally left that day, it was with a promise, not one made in words, but in the lingering glance he gave me, the unspoken acknowledgement that what had started in that cluttered, dusty room had the potential to grow into something meaningful. I sat down on the edge of a stack of boxes, letting the quiet settle around me. For the first time in years, I felt seen, not just as an employee, not just as a woman going about her routine, but as a whole person. And I realized that sometimes the most profound experiences come in the most unlikely places, with the most unexpected people, and that perhaps life still had surprises in store for me. Days passed, and the quiet tension between us became something comforting, a rhythm that didn't need words to exist. I noticed the little gestures, him pausing by my desk with a gentle smile, the way he'd check in to see how the storage room organization was going, the subtle encouragement in his tone whenever I spoke. It wasn't flashy or dramatic. It was steady, sincere, and entirely unexpected. One afternoon, after the office had emptied and the hum of fluorescent lights softened, I found myself alone in the storage room again, finishing up the last of the boxes. I heard the familiar click of the door and looked up. He was standing there, hands in his pockets, a quiet calm about him that made my chest tighten in the best possible way. "Carol," he said softly. He didn't need to rush or explain. His presence alone carried meaning. "I just wanted to say thank you for being yourself, for everything you do. I don't think I've ever appreciated someone at work the way I appreciate you." I felt warmth spread through me. "You don't have to say that," I said, though my voice wavered slightly. "But I'm glad you do." He stepped closer, slowly, deliberately, giving me the space to meet him halfway. "I've realized something," he admitted. "Life is short, and sometimes we wait too long to recognize what matters. I don't want to wait." The words hung in the air, tender and sincere, and I felt a swell of emotion I couldn't suppress. I nodded, almost without thinking. "I don't either." For a moment, we just stood there, letting the room, the sunlight, the faint smell of dust and old paper, witness a connection that had grown from quiet respect into something profoundly human. There was no grand declaration, no dramatic gesture, just honesty, trust, and a shared understanding that this was real. We talked for a while longer about our lives, our dreams, even our fears, and in that small, unassuming storage room, I realized that the heart of life often hides in the most unexpected corners. What had started as a simple day of organizing boxes had turned into a revelation about connection, intimacy, and respect. When he finally left, he lingered at the door for a moment, looked back at me, and smiled, a smile that held gratitude, admiration, and something more tender, more personal than I'd ever seen in him at the office. I waved, my own heart full, knowing that the ordinary world outside awaited, but that something extraordinary had taken root here, quietly, beautifully, and irrevocably. Sitting back on a box, I let myself breathe, let myself feel the calm, the warmth, the satisfaction of knowing that life still held surprises. It was a reminder that no matter your age, no matter how routine things may seem, the possibility for connection, for meaningful moments, is always there, sometimes in the last place you'd ever expect. And as I closed the storage room door behind me that day, I smiled to myself, carrying the memory of that gentle, unexpected bond and the quiet knowledge that this was just the beginning of something truly special.